Greetings, Plymouth. I'm happy to be part of the devotional series that you're listening to now, although I would much rather be gathering in person with you or several of you, and that'd be much more fun than speaking into an iPad microphone. But I'm glad that we can stay connected in these technological ways, and I'm happy to share with you some of the things that are on my mind and heart this week. As is the case with many believers, this week I'm focusing on the events of what we call Passion Week, the activities between the triumphal entry, Palm Sunday, which we celebrated last week, and the resurrection of Christ from the dead, which we will celebrate this coming Sunday. All the events in between those two markers are often referred to as Passion Week, and I've heard this phrase many, many times, and I just assumed that the word passion meant what we have come to think of it in modern English: passionate, driven, focused, caring a lot about something, very animated. And it comes to be the fact that that's not the case. I looked up the Latin word that we use for Passion Week, and actually, the meaning of the root word is silent submission. Silent submission. And so when we talk about the Passion Week of Christ, we're talking about the week that Christ submitted willingly without defending himself. There's another word in our English language that comes from the same root, and it's passivity, slightly different syntax than passion. With the S's, but think about it, they both start with PASS. They both come from the same the Latin root. And when we say passivity, we don't mean apathy, like I don't care at all, I don't care what happens, but rather being willing to be submitted. Passivity saying, I'm willing to have somebody else's will take over my will and operate in obedience to that will, which is what Christ did. We first start seeing this passivity, this passion and submitted silence in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he begs the Lord, his God, Father, to let the cup of punishment that he is about to bear pass from him. But what does he ultimately say? Not my will, but yours be done. And he willingly leads himself into his arrest. We'll look at this more on Thursday night at our Monday, Thursday service when we focus on the Garden of Gethsemane. But Jesus gets up from his time of prayer and willingly walks into the hands of his captors. Now, Peter gets all worked up and grabs a sword and cuts off the ear of one of the Roman soldiers, and that's actually the way we might typically define passion, that he was very passionate about not having Jesus get arrested. But Jesus rebukes him for that and says, this is what I'm here for, is to head into this death. And he willingly, in silent submission, leads himself into his own arrest and submits himself to the authorities. Then we know of several trials before the Jewish leaders, trials before Herod, Pilate. And in every case, he refused to defend himself. He was mocked. He was asked direct questions that he simply said, you can believe what you want to believe, but I know that I'm called into this submitted place. And ultimately, he walked to the cross in the ultimate act of quiet submission. I want to read to you from Isaiah 53, where the section of Isaiah 53 is often called the suffering servant. I'm going to read it from the translation of the paraphrase of the Message. He was beaten and he was tortured, but he did not say a word. Like a lamb being taken to slaughter and a sheep being sheared, He took it all in silence. Justice was miscarried, and he was led off. Did anyone know what was really happening? He died without a thought for his own welfare, beaten bloody for the sins of the people. They buried him with the wicked, threw him in a grave with a rich man, even though he'd never hurt a soul or said one word that wasn't true. Still, it's what God had in mind all along, to crush him with pain. The plan was that he give himself as an offering for sin, so that he and we would see life from it. Life, life, and more life. And that was God's plan, to deeply prosper us through him. Out of that terrible travail of his soul, he saw its worth and was glad he did it. We have a passionate Christ, a Christ who is a willingly silent sufferer for our sake. Paul in Philippians 3 says that he wants to know Christ and to know his suffering, and so to be like him in death. And that's the question I've been asking myself this week. What is it to be like Christ in his suffering? To be willing to walk in quiet submission into things I would never otherwise ask to do. I feel like that's one of the seasons of life that I'm in right now with my illness. It's not a road I would choose to walk. But my prayer is that I, like Paul, would learn to be like Christ and be silently submitted. And we see that we have every reason to celebrate, because Christ's silent submission brought us life, life, and life. Amen.